On August 7th, 1974, a man named Philippe Petit made himself famous for engineering a tightrope between the Twin Towers in New York City. He rigged a 440-pound cable and used a custom 30-foot-long, 55-pound balancing pole to do his tightrope act. He said as he stepped over the beam at 104 stories in the air that he put his left foot on the wire and he held still for a moment. 1 foot on the wire, 1 on the building. His path ahead was a 1-inch wide, 60-foot-long, swaying, vibrating wire cast over a vast urban cavern. The howling voice inside him said, "Stay on the safe side. Go back. Go down the elevator. Go home. Rethink your life entirely. Go sell insurance or something." Then he put his other foot on the wire. Faith replaced doubt. At one point in his traverse between the Twin Towers, he sat down on the wire and looked down, all the way down. People were gathering like dots on the ground. Witnesses to this beautiful, frightening, thrilling, impossible walk. Petit performed his high wire act for 45 minutes. When he was done, he was arrested. Although all the charges were forgiven in exchange for him doing a performance for children in Central Park. Those were the days. When asked why he did it, he said, "I fell in love with those towers. I had to put my wire there." He said, "I see 3 oranges and I have to juggle. I see tall buildings and I put a wire." For him, the risk was worth the love. For him, being on that wire was a way to filter the world. His ministry became to be an inspiration to those who saw him, to create spectacles that challenged people to rethink their lives, and at once to walk between the shadows of life and death. Now, I'm guessing most of us here will never walk on a wire 1,700 feet in the air. But all of us know something about the balance between life and death. If not only that we are aware that we are alive right now and that we will die. Every day we walk this balancing act. If we are honest with ourselves and each other, we know that life is fragile, prepared to fail, and that loss is a part of life, and that sorrow accompanies joy, and we go on. Today's story is that story. The Easter story is about a life that inspired and defied the status quo. It's about a high wire act of a radical teacher who demanded the loyalty of friends, who rejected the holy demarcations others made on him and then was rejected himself, who challenged the authorities to choose love over law, was abandoned and died. But the story also says that he returned to life to inspire love. Now, I don't know much about the facts of this story, and no one honest really does. No one was there who is living now, and there were no eyewitnesses, and there were no TV cameras or YouTubers taking video of what was happening. There are only tiny, frayed, mostly indecipherable scrolls which lay no claims to the tomb or the resurrection. To be honest, the facts of the story almost don't matter. The metaphor is what drives our celebration today. That a man with courage lived a life that healed hearts, pushed his followers to compassion, and performed miracles of care, if not magical feats. That is what matters. For us Unitarians, the whole dying on the cross and the atonement for the world's sins has mattered very little in the face of Jesus' teachings, the example that he lived, the love he embodied. For us, it almost doesn't matter that he died, except that the story turns on this mysterious resurrection. In a mystical sort of way, his death becomes a punctuation mark that demands we think again about what his life meant. It is a magnificent maneuver by the storytellers and the main character to conquer death itself, to defy the natural order of things, to breathe after the pulse is gone and the breath has ceased. It is something we could all hope for, but have no evidence to base the prospect on. It is the hope his friends had when he died and when they arrived at the tomb, wanting more than life itself to see him again. That's what drives this story. He wasn't there. He must have conquered death. I feel a little like his friends at the empty tomb today. You see, a good friend of mine died last week. He was 57 years old. In the prime of his life, with a loving family, a thriving career, 2 daughters in high school. His death was unthinkable, unimaginable. And at the memorial service, we all stood around in shock. How could this be true, we asked. And then, because in the Jewish tradition, a few of us went to the grave with the family, we followed the casket as it was lowered into the ground, and then we shoveled dirt into the grave like road workers. 5 or 6 of us shoveled and shoveled and shoveled. I still have mud on the shoes I'm wearing today from his grave. And the whole time I kept wanting my friend to wake up and rise out of that tomb and ask us what in the world we were doing and tell us it would all be okay, that he hadn't died. But of course that didn't happen. And all week I expected him to show up in my office or driving next to me down Mockingbird Lane, a la the HBO TV series 6 Feet Under. An apparition standing or sitting next to me, making snide comments about what I was saying or what I was thinking. I literally looked over my shoulder 2 or 3 times this past week. Just to be clear, I am not inclined to ghosts or spirits. In my rational mind, I knew he wasn't there, but somehow I also knew he was there. And I knew I wanted more than anything for him not to have died. I feel for the friends who lost their dear one, who were crestfallen at the tomb. And then they were given hope. He was not there. I know why they wanted the resurrection to be true, because the pain of loss is real. And the resurrection holds possibility. I know the desire for something good to come of something tragic. I was there at the tomb last week. The resurrection says that out of death comes life. That anyone who knows the devastation of loss knows how life emerges from loss, mostly because there is no other way but to live on. Now, I don't know yet how loss will lead to new life in my case with my friend and his family, but I believe something will emerge to hold us in a greater love and show us purpose and encourage us to attend to those we love a little better. One way I know this is true is that death sharpens our attention on life. I noticed this past week how I've been moving a little slower. I noticed how the sun has a particular tone, how the shimmer of the wind rustling in the leaves in the pecan tree next door has a special feeling, how the flowers appear one day and are gone the next in the field near my house where I walk my dog. I noticed how my children both smile a little like their mother. I know that when you lose something, your attention is sharpened, especially to your loved ones, to the movement of nature and to the world. In the Easter story, the empty tomb focuses us on the life of the man Jesus, because through this incredible plot twist, we are asked to notice his ministry, a high wire act of resistance, lifting up the downtrodden and giving dignity to those cast out of society. The plot twist of resurrection does two things. It focuses us on what matters and reminds us that something is always trying to emerge to heal the world. It focuses us on how hope tries to inject itself into moments of struggle, and that things unexpected emerge to heal and make us whole. That is the Easter truth. Which brings me to a story I love about Philippe Petit, our high wire walker from the Twin Towers. Now, soon after he did that stunt in New York City, he was invited to Jerusalem. And he decided he would stretch a wire between the Jewish and the Arabic quarters in the old city in Jerusalem, over a valley called Ben Hinnom, some say is the valley referred to as the valley of the shadow of death. He decided to stretch his wire, and then on his high wire act, he would do a stunt in honor of Jerusalem. Jerusalem means the city of peace, the city of shalom. And so he decided, in the middle of his wire act, he would reach into his pocket and pull out a dove and release it into the air. And so he said it was a little difficult to find a dove in Jerusalem. You imagine that may be true. But he found one, and he went to his hotel room and he practiced walking on the wire to the middle and then taking the dove from his pocket and releasing the dove, and each time he did it, the dove hit the wall and fell on the bed. He did it again, and the same thing happened. He said, well, the dove is a bird. It needs space. It will fly when I'm up on the wire. So the day came, and he came to his wire between the Arabic and the Jewish quarters, and he saw there 80,000 people had gathered to watch him walk over the valley of death. He said there was tension in the wire, but there was tension in the air. These were enemies, and there he was. And he took a step onto the wire, 1 foot on the building, one on the wire. And that voice again "What are you doing?" But he took another step. Faith replaced doubt. And he walked to the middle of his wire, 50 yards all the way to the center, and he stopped, and he reached into his pocket, and he picked out the dove as if a magician, and he released the dove, and the dove went flop, 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 and landed on his head. Remember, he's on a wire up there. He said, "I'll give the dove another chance." And so he took the dove from his head, and with a magnificent gesture, he released the dove again. Jerusalem, shalom. And the dove went flop, 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 and landed on his pole. The people cheered. They thought he was a genius. He had practiced this for years. So he steadied himself and sat down on the wire, I guess the instinct of a wire walker, and he took his left hand and he hit the pole as hard as he could, and the dove went up, flop, 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 and landed on the wire behind him. The people went crazy. This man must have practiced years to do this. Exhausted by the dove that wouldn't fly and this high wire act over the shadow of the valley of the shadow of death, he began to walk slowly the rest of the 50 yards. And an amazing thing happened. Not only did the dove follow, but with each step, someone started to clap. And then all the people clapped. So do this with me. Do this with me. Ready? Wait. Ready? The people didn't clap because he was amazing. They clapped, encouraging him to finish. And he made it to the end. And he turned back and looked at that wire, and he looked at 80,000 people from the Jewish and the Arabic quarters. And he realized that for an hour or for a day or for a week or maybe forever, the notion of enemy was dissolved. Because a man stood on a wire with a dove that wouldn't fly in a city at war. He realized that something beautiful had emerged that was pulling us together, dissolving enemies in a city of war. Now, the mayor of Jerusalem was there and became Petit's friend. Years later, Petit was in the mayor's office, and he saw a picture on the wall of himself on a wire with a dove on his head. And the mayor told him this. He said, "Sometimes leading this crazy city is very difficult." Can you imagine? And sometimes, when it is so difficult, I look at you, Petit, in that picture, and I think, if you could do that, I can do it. All the world over, preachers today are telling the story of Philippe Petit. Not really. They are preaching resurrection, which I say is only good if it points to something bigger than a moment 2,000 years ago. It is good if it points to the courage it takes to put one foot in front of the other, to navigate the fragility of life, and remind us that something is always waiting to emerge in the world to save us. Courage, love, unity. I believe that Easter says that always, 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 as long as we exist, something will be pushing up through high wire racks and doves that don't fly and loss, trying to bring about peace, the dissolution of enemies, and show us that love passes all understanding. That thing today I call is Easter. Easter says that in places of despair, hope emerges. That when we are at the end of our rope, we might find the holy. That a man on a wire with a stubborn dove can unify a city at war. That friends who know death and loss can turn it into love. It says that we can walk paths that call us to look for Easter moments that heal and help us speak the truth. Hold this fragile life like a dove in our hands, a symbol of a greater love than any of us can contain alone. Philippe Petit created a momentary peace by walking on his wire in an unlikely place at an unlikely time. Jesus walked a wire of ministry that was unexpected and in many cases unwanted. It was himself the emergence of the holy that was trying to heal us and still is. I like to think someone stood by in Jesus' time and watched him get through to those people in the margins he ministered to who were told they didn't deserve love. And watched as he made the powerful second-guess their motives, and as he showed the way to making peace against all odds and breaking down barriers between enemies. And that one witness in the crowd that day turned to her friend and said, "If he can do that, I can do it." Let Easter show us the way to a great hope that is emerging today. Happy Easter. I love you. Amen. May God bless us all.